Ask any good climber advice about how to get better at climbing, and they will tell you, just go out climbing. But what if you have been going out climbing and you are not getting better? Climbers often say that you should concentrate on technique, but what does that mean? What does good technique look like? If you could learn just by going climbing, you would not see the same climbers stuck working the same grades years later. If I could learn just by going out climbing, I would be a lot better by now. Because I climb a lot, and my strength definitely exceeds the grades that I climb. Sure, I have the basics, and I am relatively experienced in all climbing disciplines and can spot what less experienced climbers are doing wrong, but I am a long way off from understanding the nuances of climbing. I mean the kind of knowledge where you look at a climb and you instantly understand the right body positioning and subtle changes in movement that can be the difference between sticking a move or not. There are some climbers who have this amazing body awareness who can work it out without much effort. I definitely have to put effort into it. I would find this so frustrating. Surely it should feel easier than this. When I'm learning something that I find hard, I go through phases, one of which is frustration. Once I eventually stop feeling sorry for myself, I start to ask questions and look at it from a growth mindset perspective. It took me years to develop the strength that I have through consistent effort and hard work. Why did I think that mastering climbing movement would happen overnight? Because that is what climbing technique really is, a mastery of movement. And so I got to work and started asking some questions. And here is what I learned. You get better at climbing movement by going out climbing, but you apply conscious thought to everything you are doing and you start asking why. Oh, and you ask for help. There is something about climbing that makes it almost unusual to get coaching sessions. Look at most sports, and coaching is an integral part of progression. I think historically, climbing has been a sport where you learn from your friends and by doing, and spend years mastering this craft. Speak to an older outdoor climber who spent their life climbing, and they will have this aura of pride in their learning through experience, and will most likely scoff when you say to them that you want to pay someone to help you climb. I came from a background where if you want to learn, you work with a coach and they tell you how to get to your goal. It is the opposite side of the spectrum, and I don't think either approaches work for me. I would not want to have a coach to dictate my life like I used to, but without some guidance, I can feel lost. So the best middle ground is direct my own training and climbing and get guidance when I need it. A coach is someone who can help you speed up the process of learning. I know the difference that I can make to someone in a very short space of time when I'm instructing. So working with someone with more experience than me just makes sense. I got some one-to-one coaching specifically for improving my technique. I worked with Nick Sillam, who is the head coach at New Age Climbing. The great thing about a one-to-one is that an experienced coach can help you narrow down what you need to work on first. They can see what would have the biggest impact on your climbing. In other words, the low-hanging fruit of climbing progression. I don't have any footage from my indoor session, sadly, as I was so focused on what I was doing, I didn't really record anything. The biggest takeaways from the sessions were better route reading, using twisting to get my hips closer to the wall, and thinking about the forces that my body creates in certain positions. I used to climb front on a lot, and I learned how to properly twist to not only reach the holds that are far away, but to keep my hips closer to the wall on steeper terrain. Nick did a lot of recording with immediate feedback. I would do a climb and we would analyze what forces were applied on which hold. The goal was to identify more efficient body positions and understand why that is. I also did a technique assessment with John Kettle, who is a very experienced mountaineering instructor and coach based in the Lake District. He wrote a book on climbing technique, which I would recommend getting as it unlocks some of the key principles. Sometimes, however, a knowledge in a book can be abstract, so I booked a day with him to really understand some of the concepts better. Again, I didn't really record much because I was just really focused on what he was saying, but the biggest things that I took from it was using momentum to climb, different breathing techniques, and his approach to trad tactics. I was working on a climb called Blood Falls over about a month or so and struggled to stick the top move. I didn't understand why I couldn't do the move, as it wasn't a strength thing. I came back to the problem after the session with John and remembered some of the breathing principles. I stuck the move straight away, even though it was a warm sunny day on grit. It was such a small subtle change, but it made enough difference to finish the problem, which felt pretty great. I wonder how many more of these little gold nuggets of wisdom are there that could unlock more of my projects. Big part of climbing is still learning from friends and other climbers. I am lucky that I have friends who climb harder than me, who are happy to share advice. That part of climbing legacy is so important in my opinion, and really makes climbing such a special thing. But coaching isn't enough. You need to consolidate what you learned and put it into practice. What did I mean when I said conscious practice? Sometimes I find that I finish a climb and can't remember what I have just done exactly to a small detail unless I really make an effort to concentrate on it. Conscious practice means exactly that, being fully present and immersed in what you're doing, planning what you're doing, executing, and reviewing afterwards. This kind of focus is definitely hard to sustain all the time. Especially after a day's work, I often just want to climb and have a catch up with friends, and I don't always have tons of energy and focus left in my tank. Climbing for most of us is also a really social thing. Catching up with friends is a huge part of it, and since I'm definitely quite a chatty person, I can often focus more on the conversation than the climbing. You also end up doing a lot less climbing when you spend more time thinking about what you're doing and planning properly. If you only have a short session available, it makes it much harder to commit to working on this aspect of climbing. I knew that continuing to just climb was not going to allow me to progress, so I made it my goal to focus on this. One thing that really helped me was to start bouldering on my own. I would go out at least once a week by myself and either work on my current project or do a mileage session. I set myself time to explore my climbing, and honestly, this has been one of the things that had the biggest impact on my climbing in the past 18 months. When you're in a group of climbers, especially if they're more experienced than you, they will often tell you the beta, help you work it out, or you can just watch them do it. On your own, you have no one but yourself. After a few solo sessions, I was really surprised that I started to experiment with my movement a lot more. I came up with some different beta for some of my projects and felt this weird kind of freedom to just try what works. I started to feel excited about finding a way to climb something that works for my body type and the strengths that I have, rather than follow some arbitrary, this is how it should be done beta. I would use recording of myself just like when I have sessions with Nick and try to analyze my body position. Seeing it makes it much easier for me to understand what I'm doing. I never managed to complete anywhere near a full outdoor circuit on easy days, and sometimes only worked one hard problem on my days when I wanted to try hard. The goal wasn't to climb as much as possible. The goal was to start unlocking the sequences or moves that I couldn't do before. Why was I falling off a move became the question, rather than, for God's sake, I fell off the move again. The few times when I had the moment of understanding exactly what happened, moving my hips slightly in on a climb, I was absolutely over the moon. I started to feel like every project that I had opened was a puzzle that needed solving, and when I looked back at my summer season, I realized that every one of my senses finally came together because I unlocked a small detail and learned a new thing with every climb. That honestly felt better than the send. Don't worry, I haven't become a loner. After a session by yourself, having someone there to give you psych, some encouragement, and a spot gives you an extra 10%, that's for sure. I hope it is obvious that this is definitely not one of those become an expert in something in a week kind of videos. This is more like, I am committed to mastering climbing over my lifetime because that is how long it takes to fully understand the movement. I bet you though, if you ask those people who we would consider masters, they would tell you that they haven't even scratched the surface. So that is where I am right now. Committed to lifelong learning.